The final thing I just want to get your thoughts on, not necessarily related to Saints either, is the FA Cup and the FA's decision to scrap the replays from next season. They've insisted that all parties have accepted it, and they've said it was done with the best interests of all the clubs at heart. Glenn, a lot of clubs have kind of like released statements, haven't they, saying how annoyed they are about it. It doesn't seem like it's going to affect us. I mean, it turns out we would have played in one of the last replays, wasn't it? That Watford game, which I guess was the fourth round.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's separate issues at play here. I mean, with regards to Saints, we're a relatively big club, even if we're in the Championship. So playing replays, not playing replays, probably doesn't make a huge difference to us. But that's not the point, is it? The point is that they say all parties are happy with it. Yeah, all parties they actually consulted, which we assume were the 20 Premier League clubs, and that was it.
If they even bothered going down into the lower half of that division.
That's exactly what I was going to say. You know how the Premier League works. It's the Super League lot, and that's it. And so, yeah, I like the fact there's been sort of universal condemnation of it from anyone who's not in the Premier League, and all the pundits have had their say and stuff like that. I just hope they keep it going. I mean, ultimately, it probably won't do any good because the FA Cup is run by the same organisation that runs the Premier League. So it's another example of. I mean, the competition for me has, it's such a magical thing when I was younger, and obviously we won it, and I remember that. But it's been eroded over the last few years, and VAR has made it a shambles. It's got that took a big chunk of integrity away from it. Because of VAR in some games but not in others in the same competition. It's ridiculous. So basically you're playing two different sets of rules depending on where the game happens to be. I don't know, it's just one isolated incident, but anyone who saw the Coventry Man United game just now, no VAR commentary could argue that they score a last minute winner, and instead it gets disallowed by a toenail.
Yeah.
So I think the FA Cup has kind of the shine's gone off it, certainly over the last sort of 4 or 5 years since the VAR thing's been going on, and this is another thing that takes the shine off even further, and it's a shame. And and I don't think people really appreciate quite how much earning a replay at a Premier League club, even if it's a relatively small Premier League club, how far that money goes when you're talking about a level 4, 5, 6 club. That now doesn't have that carrot. They just have to hope they get drawn away in the first game.
And also how exciting it is to watch those games. They're always.
Yeah, I was going to add, Glen summed it up brilliantly. Not that my testament's worth anything to anybody, but I worked for Eastleigh Football Club for 2 years before I did this job, and if anyone's in any doubt about the value of replays, you rest completely assured that there are clubs maybe below Eastleigh's level slightly who that money has meant that they've come up through the leagues. They've had a chance to survive when maybe they couldn't otherwise. But also this season, Eastleigh taking Newport to a replay at the Silver Lake. It's not away to Old Trafford or anything, but it was their biggest game of the season, I'd imagine, by quite some distance. It's the chance for replay games that you didn't have in the initial round to be selected by TV, because obviously, Man United, Wrexham and Salford were all picked in the initial round. Once they all go through or get knocked out, you've got a chance to be picked in the replay, and that could be hundreds of thousands of pounds just in broadcast money. So, if anybody is in doubt, these clubs, they really do need that money. And if you get the chance to, and like you said, the chance to go to Bolton or something in a replay for an Eastleigh fan is, one of their biggest moments. So I think it's a massive shame. And these League Two clubs, National League clubs, they play more games than half the Premier League teams anyway. Man City and things like that are an exception because they go to the end of every single competition. But other clubs shouldn't be punished just because they've got hundreds of millions of quid to be able to do that. So I think it's a massive shame. And if they don't, just renege on that slightly, I'll be gutted.
I mean, if Arteta wants his players to play less, just be rubbish in cup competitions, get knocked out in the first round, and then you can rest every midweek. Easy.
And am I right in thinking, Steve, just quickly, it's due to the expansion of the European dates? Is that right? They've gone from like 6 weeks to 10 weeks or something, so the European clubs wouldn't be able to play on those dates. That's kind of how they're dressing it up and saying
Basically, yes. So the UEFA calendar has changed because all three of the competitions are moving to this new absolute nonsense Swiss style one big group stage for each of the three competitions. So what that entails is there's 36 teams in there rather than the 32 that's been in previously, and as a result they've managed to squeeze in 2 more games for everybody. So everybody, whichever pot you are drawn in, so you're still drawn into the 4 pots as you have been previously, but what you get is you play 2 games against teams from each of the 4 pots, and the teams that you play are randomly drawn, to the extent that UEFA had to actually come out and clarify that we're not going to be able to do the fixtures draw on sort of on TV because it's so complex and so tedious that I mean, given how bad these draw procedures are anyway, the fact that even UEFA are binning it is shows how ridiculous the thing is.
That's not going to be manipulated at all, then, is it?
Exactly. That's the first thing. If you can't even see it being made, how can you trust its integrity? It's an absolute joke.
And so as a result, there's 2 extra game weeks for the group stage. So they've basically hidden behind this and said, well, because we've got these extra games, we're not. We can't do this to the players. We can't. We need to look out for the welfare of these players, coming from clubs whose season finish on the 19th of May, and then on the 22nd of May are playing a post-season friendly in Melbourne. It's an absolute joke, the whole thing. I mean, the concept of not playing replays, I can accept that there are some arguments in favour of it, in terms of the players do play a lot of games. The pace of the game is such these days that fitness and player welfare should be more considered. But at the end of the day, you can't give with one hand and take with the other in terms of saying, well, we care about players, whilst at the same time flogging them to death with more games in Europe just because they're more valuable. It's nonsense. But ultimately, the biggest scandal of this is the lack of consultation. You got more than 700 teams enter the FA Cup every year. Most of them obviously don't get out of the qualifying rounds, but it's interesting that the qualifying rounds are still having replays. And yet rounds 1 and 2, which obviously don't feature Premier League or Championship clubs, you can't have replays there. So you won't have, for example, from this season where Charlton and Cray Valley Paper Mills drew, and they managed to take him back to a replay at their ramshackle little non-league ground.
Yeah, and we all watched it on the telly, didn't we?
Yeah,
it was great.
It was brilliant.
They'd have made £70,000 out of that broadcast money, I imagine, for that replay.
Yeah,
I'm sure there'll be a few more clubs speaking out this week.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. But you've got I think we're up to more than 100 clubs now that have made statements. Interestingly, not many Championship ones.
No, there'll be a few ex-players as well, I noticed today. I'm sure there'll be more to come.